All right, welcome to week 5. I can't believe it's 5 already. This week we are doing croissants. So probably wondering, am I crazy for doing sourdough last week and then croissants this week? Probably, yeah. But this is gonna be really fun. Again, it's a long process, but oh gosh, it is so worth it. Okay, so first we want to do it's called la de trompe, and that's basically the dough part of it. So I have my flour. I'm gonna put in sugar. Now this looks like a lot of ingredients. My actual recipe that I have for when I make these, I've already doubled it in the recipe so that it makes a lot more. When I put it on the website, then I'll have it as the normal amount, so it'll be half of this. But this does seem like a lot of ingredients, but I always like to make a lot because they never last. And it is a lot of work, but it's nice to have the extra. And if you don't want to make croissants with all of it, you're still making a puff pastry. So you can freeze it and use it at another time if you want to, or do a lot of other things with it. Okay, so the flour, sugar, salt, and yeast. So I'm gonna give that just a quick mix with my dough hook here. Give a little mix, and then I'm going to make a well in the center. Here, make a little divot in the center there. And you want to have, when you have these liquids for this, it's the water and whole milk, you want to have them room temperature. I didn't prepare ahead of time with that, so I put it on the stove until it got to 80 degrees-ish. It's been cooling for a little bit, so it's probably around 78 or so. You just don't want it to be cold, but you, again, don't want it to be too hot because you have the yeast in here and you don't want it to kill that yeast. So I'm just gonna take the water and milk, I had put them together in here, and pour it in. We're gonna put this into the mixer and let the dough hook work for a little bit until it comes together and there are no dry spots or extra wet spots. So just until it comes all together. And then I'm gonna cover it and let it rest for 10 minutes. So I'll come back after the resting period and show you what the dough looks like, and we'll move on to the next step. So I know I said I'd come back after the resting period, but I just had this on the mixer and I wanted to show you, this is what's called a shaggy dough. And so it's not dry pockets or anything, it just hasn't quite absorbed all the moisture yet. So that's what the rest is gonna do. It's gonna do like an autolyze, kind of what we did with the sourdough. It's a much quicker period of time, it's a 10-minute, but you put all of this together, you get a shaggy dough, and then you let it rest. And when we come back, I'll show you the difference from this to what it turns into. And it's going to soften up a lot and absorb the moisture into the flour. So we're gonna be able to add the butter and then really knead it. So this is what it looks like once that moisture gets absorbed into the flour, and you see it's not shaggy anymore, it actually looks like a dough. And then once it's kneaded, it's gonna come together and get rid of any lumps and all of that stuff. But I just wanted to show you what a difference it makes letting it sit for that 10 minutes. I'm just cutting up the butter, and it's, for my double recipe, it's a half cup, so it's 1 full stick, 8 tablespoons of butter. So I'm just cutting it into just under a tablespoon-ish so that it can incorporate more easily into the dough. And then I'm gonna put this back onto the mixer and put all of the butter in at once and let it mix. Sometimes you have to scrape down the sides, turn off the mixer for a second, scrape it down so that it isn't sticking, or so that it stops like sliding along the sides of the bowl because of the butter. But it will eventually work itself out, and then I'm gonna come and hand knead it. The recipe doesn't say that you have to when you read the recipe, but I always like to, so I'll bring it over and we'll do the non-soft dough, the more cohesive dough kneading technique for this. Okay, I'm gonna go put this on the mixer, do the butter, and then I'll see you for the kneading. All right, so this went for about 3 minutes or so in the mixer. It is nice and soft now. There's still some chunks of butter, but that'll go away as I do the hand kneading. I wanted to make a note that when you're using a mixer for doughs, dough is really tough and mixers are a machine, so you have to be really careful. You don't want to go, they recommend not going above level 2 on your speed if you have this kind of mixer. When you're using the dough hook and working on doughs, you don't want to go above level 2. That's just because it is a tough thing to mix together, and you can feel sometimes on the top of the mixer, if you put your hand on top, it does get a little bit warm. So you don't want to stress it or make it overheat. It'll auto shut down usually, depending on the kind of mixer you have, but you still don't want to damage anything. Okay, here's my flour. I just have a cup of flour here. Lightly flour this, and then I'm going to take out the dough. And this is the dough, what we have so far. So since this is not a sticky dough, let's see if I can move this back a little bit. There we go. We're gonna be not using that slapping method that we did last week with the sourdough. I'm gonna take this, fold it in half towards me, and then roll it away from me. And I do have the flour on the board, so that helps it to not stick, and it creates a nice little coating on there for the consistency of it. But you don't want to over flour, because you don't want that flour to be added too much into the dough, because we have a really nice consistency and you do want it to be this nice softness to it. So I'm just going to do the kneading and then push away. So I'm going to do this for probably 7-8 minutes maybe, and then it's going to look really nice, and the word that they use is like a supple dough, and you're going to have a really nice soft exterior to it, and it'll spring back. It's already springing back a little bit, but you want it to be a little tighter than this. So I'm going to keep on kneading, and I'll show you what it's going to look like. I just hit a pocket of butter with my thumb, so that's good. I want to incorporate everything, and I don't think you can see it on the camera, but this butter just came out. I'm going to take it, I'll smear it in, and then I'll just keep kneading. But that's why we do this, is to get all of the ingredients incorporated. You could keep going in the mixer if you want. This is a really fun dough to knead because of the texture of it, and I just like to enjoy it. So this is a really big hunk of dough because, again, I double it. But so normally you would be dealing with half of this if you were making this recipe. So it's more manageable. All right, let's see here. Yeah, you can see that spring back now really well. Yep. All right, so that's what we want. I'm going to, since this is actually 2 recipes, I'm going to cut it in half now so that I can work with each half individually, because when you're rolling it out and putting the butter in it later, it's way too big. It turns into, like, I don't know, 3.5 feet or something if you're trying to work with this. And I don't have that kind of counter space, so I will cut it in half and then continue on. Bench scraper. And if you're really particular, you can weigh it if you want to. I'm going by eye because you can pretty much, I mean, an ounce or so isn't going to make the hugest difference. So if you want, you can always take some, put it over here, whatever you want. All right. And then I'm going to take a knife and I'm going to cut in the top like this. So what this does is when it's rising, it's going to spread out from here. It's going to come up in the middle and push out. And this is going to kind of create more of the corners you need for when you're rolling it out into the rectangles. So we're gonna let it rise, and then we're gonna put it in the fridge for quite a while, for at least 4 hours. You can do overnight, you can do like 12 hours. I think we're gonna do the 4 so that we can keep cooking. So I'm gonna put these in bowls, cover them, and I'll just put them in the proving oven really low, just so, because it's cold here. So I'll show you after it rises. All right, so while the dough is rising, I want to make my butter block. So I tilted the camera down a little bit. I know I'm cutting off my head a little bit here, but that's okay. You just really more need to see this. So this big block is the equivalent of 4 sticks of butter. So for each recipe, I need 2 sticks of butter. So instead of cutting it like this, I'm actually gonna cut it like this in about half, as well as I can. Let's see, is that, it's pretty good. You can use sticks of butter as well if you want. I like to get these for this kind of project just because it stays together a little easier. This part is loud, so we're going to be hitting it with the rolling pin. It is loud, and try to make sure you don't have things around on your countertop because it will shake them and it will make just so much noise. So I'm actually even going to move this and this for the moment. I moved the marble slab over there so that it didn't get any damage. So what I'm going to do is take this. This is parchment paper, not wax paper. Had a friend learn the hard way the difference between wax and parchment, but that was due to applying heat to wax paper. So this is going to be a parchment paper, even though we're not heating it. But I'm gonna fold this over and start hitting it. Also, you want to do this when the butter is cold because then it'll peel off the parchment easier. So once it's to about 1/2 inch thickness, then we're going to transfer it over. It's almost there. I'm just going to do a little bit more though. Now I do try to reuse things as much as possible. So for this, I'm going to use this parchment paper again to hit out the other half into the butter block. But I do need the fresh parchment in order to get this into its shape. Because I did this as small as I could for this part. Because a lot of times when you are hitting it, it will tear. So you don't want this to be your final butter holder. All right, so now I'm going to take this bigger piece here. Use my rolling pin to hold it down. And I'm going to transfer this over like that. And save this for my next block. Now what we need to do with this is make an 8 by 8 square. Okay. So here's my ruler, and I'm going to do, this is 8. So I want to kind of get an idea here. If this is my first part, I'll fold that over. All right, so that's my 0 mark. And then I'm going to do my 8, which is right here. And the way I'm making sure it's straight is just lining up the edges of the parchment as I fold it, and then it'll stay straight, the top and bottom. All right, and if you push down a little bit, the butter will help it stick. All right, now I have to go the other way. I'm actually almost already at an 8. So yeah, I'm actually gonna fold this over here. Use this to just set on here to hold it down while I do this side. And then we're going to flip it over. Okay, and that is my square. This is just the back part, that's not important. But you want to have those nice sharp corners. And then we're going to roll it out. So by hitting it and beating it with a rolling pin, we softened it up. It's warmed up a little bit because we've been handling it. So now we're able to roll it out, but it's still a hard block of butter. It's not softened up like if you left it out. So I'm just rolling it out. The only thing with this is I think people have a tendency, and I know I do, to kind of start lighter here and then push out at the edge because you are trying to fill in the edge. But the middle is where it has the biggest thickness of butter. So you really need to make sure you get that pressure down in the middle and then push it out to there. And then push out. There are a lot of techniques to rolling that I wasn't aware of, just because of the nature of flour and dough. So this is actually a really good bake to kind of be going over that. And we will, because we roll this stuff out a lot. Okay. You want to make sure it gets into those corners for those sharp corners. But don't push so hard that it pops the parchment paper. So this is my butter, and it's nice and thin. I don't know if you can see that too well. Let's do this side. There we go. It's nice and thin, and this is going to go into the fridge because you want it to harden back up. And when we're ready to start the next process after the dough goes into the fridge for the 4 to 12 hours, then this will be ready, and you won't have to worry about doing it right beforehand and it being cold enough and all of that. So I like to do this while it's doing the rise, and then I'll do my other butter block, and we'll see you later. Okay, so I've taken the dough out of the fridge. It was in for about 5.5 hours, and this is how it looks now. You can see where I made those cuts that has these corners, which will help with the rolling out now. So I'm going to take the dough, flour this a little bit more. There we go, spread it out. Okay, so I'm going to take out the dough. And now we're going to just kind of stretch the corners out a little bit and use the palm of our hand to deflate. So I'm just taking out some of the air that had when it rose in the fridge. And you can see as I'm doing that, the corners are kind of forming on their own. All right, so now that I have this square, I'm going to take saran wrap and create like a cross with the saran wrap. And I'm going to have that here. So I have one piece laying down and another piece perpendicular to that. So it's here and here, and I'm going to take the dough and put it in the middle of that. And let's see about how big. That is actually about the 8 inches. So I'm going to just cover this. See which one was on top. Okay, so I want to do this one first. This was the one on the bottom, so I want to take this up and over and try and create the nice corners here. And do this side and create those corners. This part here. And so I'm creating that 8-inch square like we did with the butter. I'm creating that with the dough. So I'm going to take the rolling pin, roll it so it has nice straight corners and edges. And then this is just going to go into the freezer for 20 minutes. So it's going to get a bit harder because we want the texture of this to match the texture of the butter, so that they'll meld together more easily when we start doing the folds and the rolling. So that's all that we have for right now. And I'm gonna do my other piece and then come back in like 20 minutes and we'll start with the butter and putting the dough together. Okay, so I just took the butter out of the fridge and I took the dough out of the freezer. So what we're gonna do now is encase the butter in the dough. So I'm gonna set this aside, and this is doing really well. It's folding, bending a little bit, and without breaking, so that's exactly what we want. And I'm going to open up the dough. And we save this plastic because we use it throughout the whole process. Okay. There we go. Okay, so make sure you have your ruler handy. And what we're going to do for this, didn't want to set the saran wrap on the stove. All right, lightly flour. I'm going to rub it. Okay, so now we're going to take this and we're going to roll it out. We have it as an 8-inch square right now. So this is already 8 inches, and I need this to be 16 inches. So we need this to become double the length. So if I look here, I'm going to try to roll it out to about here without getting too much wider this way. Now, when you work with dough, it's really hard if you start at this end and you just start rolling out, because you're going to end up going back and forth. And you don't want to do that with dough because you're working gluten strands and you're training the dough and the gluten to what you want it to do. So what you want to do is start in the middle, and you're going to not so much push down, but you're going to think out. So you're going to put pressure, but not straight down. You're going to think pressure going out. And then you lift up, start in the middle, and you go this way. So you don't want to just start in on one side of it and go in that direction only. All right, so I'm going to flour this just a little bit and flip it over, because you want to make sure that your dough isn't sticking, especially once we get the butter in there. You don't want to be stretching the dough unevenly. So you want to make sure it's not sticking at all and it's moving nicely. And you can see how much this is moving along the board. All right, I'm going to go back to the middle and roll it out this way. And then I'll start here and kind of pull this down just a little bit, middle up to the edge. And I'm just creating a little bit more of a rectangle on the corners. All right, so I'm going to measure this and see how close I am to what I need. All right, so first, actually, let me lift it off of the board, because sometimes if you roll it out and it sticks to the board a little bit, it'll maintain the stretch, and you need to know what the dough actually is. Okay, so we're looking at about 9 right here, which is fine at the moment. That's 12 and 16. All right, so really I just kind of want to bring in this a little bit. So I'm gonna do that. Okay. Just kind of loosening up the dough a little bit here. Okay. Now, what you want to do is I like to use a pizza cutter. You can use a knife if you want to. You can use scissors for certain parts of this if you really want. Pizza cutter really makes a nice clean cut, and it works nicely with the ruler. So I'm gonna do this and clean it up just a little bit. Okay. And then I'll do this side. The butter's not in there yet, so it's not imperative that all of your lines are completely straight yet. But once we start the lamination process of folding in that butter into the dough, you do want to make sure that it's pretty squared off. All right, so I'm going to take this. I'm going to open up my butter block. I'm not going to take it completely out. I'm just going to open it, and then I'm going to flip it onto my dough. So I'm here. I pull this under, and I'm just going to flip it into the middle of this dough, trying to line it up the best that I can before I peel off the parchment. There we go. Nice and easy. If you've ever worked with stickers or vinyl, it's kind of the same thing of when you are transferring the sticker. You don't want to pull up on the parchment. You want to keep it close and along the butter itself so that you're not ripping it apart too much. Now, I'm going to pull this out just a little bit, and we want to cover into the middle. Doesn't have to be perfect in there. We are going to roll this out again, and then same with this side, but you do want it to meet. All right, so let's stretch it a little bit more, and I'm going to pinch it together so that it's closed. Just along this. Okay. And then when I roll it out, it'll tidy up. And then I'm going to do along these edges here as well. I'm going to pinch. I'm going to lift up this whole thing, move it over, flour again. All right, put it here. I'm going to turn it like this. And make sure it's floured up here, because now I need to roll it out to 24 inches. And this board is about 26 inches or so. So I'm going to almost have to do the length of this board. All right. So same technique, middle, pushing the dough out. And same on this side, middle, pushing the dough out. Nice and easy, nice and gently. And you can see how nicely this tidied up. I'm gonna add some flour, and then I'm gonna flip it over, because you don't want to stretch the dough too unevenly on one side. So since we're trying to get a good amount of length here, I am going to use the roller on this side as well. Just a little bit of flour. More so just kind of putting the flour on my hand and then rubbing it on. And do it on this side. Go here, in the middle, and out. Middle, and out. And then, you'll see, it really extended pretty much the length of the board. All right, I'm going to flip it over one more time, because we do want this to be the outside, the side without the seam, even though this did tidy up really well. So I'm going to take this, trim those edges. All right, so you can see it's nice and clean edge there. And then I'll do this side as well. And then we're going to do our book fold. All right, so find about the middle. I'm going to bring in this side, about halfway mark. And this side, almost to the halfway. You want to leave a little bit of room here in the center, because you're going to take this and fold it over. And that's our book fold, and you've now created 4 times the layers that you originally had. And now you want to make sure that this is all lined up really well. Push it down a little bit so it all adheres to itself. I'm going to wrap this back up in the plastic, put it in the freezer for 20 minutes, and then switch it over to the fridge for an hour. And then we'll do our next fold, which is a different type of fold. All right, So this went into the freezer for 20 minutes. It just came out of the fridge for an hour and sat here on the counter for 5 minutes because you don't want it to be super cold when you're trying to roll it out. So you want to let it come to room temp just a little bit. So this was our double turn, also called the book fold. And now we're going to do our single turn. I'm going to unwrap this and lightly flour my workspace. Okay, so sometimes when you're doing certain other types of recipes, they'll have you not do the book fold. They'll have you do 3 of the single turns, but this one is nice because you only have to do the 2 of them. Right now I'm at about 5 inches wide, and I want to get it back, yeah, about 4 3/4. So I want to get it back to that kind of 8 wide, and then do the length again. And then we're going to do a different type of fold on this. So I'm just going to kind of punch it down a little bit with the rolling pin, and that'll help soften it up. I start in the middle, and I go towards me, middle, and do the other way. I'll do that just one more time. And then I'm going to start extending it out this way. And remember, you're not thinking down because you're going to put divots into your dough. So you want to think down and out, and you're going to get a more consistent roll on it. And then I'll go this way. And I'll flip it over. So you can even see the difference of why I flip it over here. Because this stuck to the board a little bit, and then the top got rolled out past it. So you don't want to have that. You want to try and keep it consistent in how the dough is stretching. So that's why I flip it over, and I'll do it this way. Middle out. And you can see the middle kind of went a little bit beyond everything else, but that's fine because that's going to get cut off. Start in the middle and push it out. Okay, and then I'll do this way one more time. And then I'll flip it once more, do it out to the long ends, and then we'll do our fold. It's pulling back just a little bit, but that's fine. It's just cold. Here. Okay. So again, I'm going to square off the ends. And I don't know if you can see it on there. You can start to kind of see the layers of the butter and the dough forming, which is really cool. But this is what you want this edge to look like, as opposed to having just the dough on the outside. So that's why we cut and we trim it, so that you don't have these big mounds of dough inside. You keep it nice and clean. All right, so the single turn is going to be like a letter that you'd be putting in an envelope. So I'm going to take this side, bring it 1/3 of the way up, and take this, and that's it. So I'm just going to push it down a little bit, make sure that there's no extra flour. A little bit right there. I'm going to push it down so it all sticks together. And this is going to, again, go into the freezer for 20 minutes and the fridge for an hour. And then we'll do one more time of rolling it out to the size we're going to need it tomorrow. And then it goes in the fridge overnight. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this back up tightly in the saran wrap. And the reason you want to do it tightly is because you don't want air getting to this dough. What'll happen is it'll get hard and then that part of the dough is ruined. And so you want to try and get all of the air away from this, and that's why it's a tight wrap when you're wrapping the saran wrap, especially for the overnight. But I'm going to go ahead and do my other block of dough, and I'll see you after the hour and 20. This is the last part for today. So this was in the freezer for 20 minutes, then the fridge for an hour, and now we're going to do our last rolling out. There will be no folding in this step. We're just going to put it onto a baking sheet and it'll go in the fridge overnight, 8 to 12 hours. So this has been out on the counter resting for a couple of minutes. And I'm just going to roll it out. My board is 16 by 24. So I need to roll this out to a 14 by 17. So it's going to be close to the dimensions of the board. Pretty big because we want it nice and thin so it can get nice and solid while it's in the fridge overnight, because I'm going to cut it and stretch it and do a lot to it tomorrow when we're shaping it. So I'm going to take some of my flour. So these bubbles happen because you still have yeast in this dough. And the dough, when it's sitting in the fridge for an hour, is rising. And that yeast is working. So you are going to get some air pockets. And that's fine. I'm just going to go in at the side, pop, and then just press it down. All right, I'm going to flip this over. And we have a little bit of butter leakage here, and that's okay. I'm just going to take a little flour, kind of sprinkle it over that so it absorbs it, and then I'll keep rolling it out, and it'll be fine. It'll pretty much just cover up. So all I'm going to do is get it to the 14 by 17 is probably going to be about there. And then I'll wrap it up in the plastic wrap again tightly. I'll put it onto the baking sheet, and I can just stack them up on the baking sheet because I have the two, and put it in the fridge 8 to 12 hours, and then we'll come back and we'll get to the fun part of cutting it and shaping it, and then it gets baked. So I will see you then. Hello, good morning. We are on to the next day. And we're going to shape everything now. So this is a really fun part. You do need to have your ruler because we're going to be cutting things into certain sizes. But really quickly, just wanted to kind of show you what I'm going to be doing for the filled. So the first batch I'm going to do as regular croissants. As you know, they're just rolled and they'll look like a crescent. For the second batch of dough, I like to do filled. So I'm going to be doing pain au chocolat, and I'm going to be doing with the almond paste or marzipan. This is actually store-bought. I usually make it, but I found this on really good price. So I got it and I used it the last batch I had done, and it was just really good. So, and then this is lemon curd. So when I cut off pieces of the dough that I'm not using for the croissants, I like to still bake them. I don't throw them away. So last night, what I had cut off of the edges when I was doing the folds, my husband and I put them into the toaster oven and put some of the lemon curd on it. And it's just really good. It's a great snack. We weren't serving it. It was just the two of us. The kids had gone to bed, so we really liked this. These are specially made. I had been doing dark chocolate of a name brand for a long time, but it shattered a lot when I was trying to cut it, and it got messy. So I recently just indulged and bought the bâtons, and these are just chocolate that are made specifically for baking, and more so for pain au chocolat. So it's just chocolate, and it holds its shape really well. It's the perfect amount. So I'm going to be using these. Okay, so those are all the fillings that I'm going to be doing. We'll get on to the cutting. Okay, so lightly flouring. This time very lightly, because I'm just making sure that there's no moisture or anything on my board. And you can you see? Right here, you can see from when I had wiped my board down, there was some moisture. So that's actually where the flour is kind of sticking. So I'm going to take it, get that off of there. And let's see. Good. All right. We don't want any of that to be on our croissants. I'll take my first batch. So this was in the fridge overnight, and I'm gonna have to roll it out a little bit more, which is fine because they do rise a little bit, and I don't want that much of a rise. I want it to be less air in there. I'm gonna show you two different ways. I can smell it. So when it sits overnight, it does, and it doesn't really ferment, but it sits and the yeast grows. So you will have a little bit of like a sour smell, just a little bit, and that's what you want. It's really nice. All right, I'm going to check my measurements on this and roll it out. So I'm going to be showing you two different ways of shaping when we get to it. So lightly knock the air out. And you can see that big bubble of air. That's the yeast having worked. So there is quite a bit of air. And I'm going to slowly and gently press it out. There. So I'm going to just take here. Again, showing they're really thin now, the layers, but these are the layers with the butter and the dough. And this is the side when it was rolled out, it just doesn't, it's closed up. So you want to make sure that you're working with dough that has the layers. That's why we cut this part off. But again, I'll be using this later. All right, do this side. So I'm going to take my bench scraper and measure 4 inches, 8, 12. I'm going to do the same on the top area here. I'm going to do 4, 8, and 12. All right. And you don't want to poke all the way through. You just want to make little marks so that you can line it up and cut it. And you don't want to push down on the ruler too much when you have it on here. And you can freehand it. You can just eyeball it if you want. And I have this mark here. And I can eyeball it to the next mark. It's just kind of nice to use the ruler. Okay, now from here, this part we will be eyeballing. You can use the ruler if you want, but I'm gonna go from this corner here to the top corner, the opposite corner. So we're making triangles. 1. Now this is if you're wanting to make the normal crescent shape, the croissants that you normally see. This is not for any of the filled. We'll be doing that next. Right, and there. So we cut it into the 4-inch sections, and then we cut each of those in half, so we have 8 croissants that we're going to be working with. The first method you can do is, well, we always are going to just grab here and stretch it out. You want to make it nice and long, because then that gives you more room to have all of the layers on the roll. All right, and I'm going to stretch out the bottom. Now the first technique was the one I had originally started with learning, and I'm going to take the bench scraper and go about an inch in. This one has measurements, so it's kind of nice to help. And I'm just going to cut a slit in the bottom about an inch, inch and a quarter up, like this, so it looks kind of like legs. And if you stretch it out, it's going to look like the Eiffel Tower, the Tour Eiffel. You're going to have kind of like a Eiffel Tower shape. And you pull these legs out, you want to get a nice kind of span on it. So with this one, you take these inside corners and you're going to kind of put them to the outsides. So you're creating a V here at the bottom, like a V. And loosely roll it. So what this does is it creates another area where there's more air, and the croissant is able, the dough is able to rise into that space instead of making it really tight and not giving it room to get the flakiness that you want inside. And then you just roll it. Right. So there's this version. And this is nice. I got 1, 2, 3 layers on it. Look here. You have the base 1, 2, and 3. So that's a nice layered croissant. And I'm just putting it on my baking sheet. And you can let it go out to the sides, or you can form it into more of a croissant shape. So the other version is, again, we're going to stretch it out a little bit. Not as much as we did the other one, because we're going to kind of mold it a little bit more. We're going to get a nice stretch here. Right, and then we're going to cut the bottom off, because this is still a little bit rounded down here. So we're going to cut it off so it's even. Because if you look at these, let's see, what can you see here? Okay. If you look at this, it's not an even triangle. So we're stretching this out, this bottom part a little bit, and then we're cutting it off so that it becomes even. Okay? Now, this one we're not going to cut. We're going to keep extending it a little bit. Extend it down here. You want to get about maybe 3 inches wide, if you can, on this bottom part. Right? And you're going to keep on extending it out, just gently, very gently pulling on it so that you get a wider triangle all around. Okay? And I'm going to do up one more time. Okay. Now with this one, we're not doing the slit. We're just going to start rolling it. Kind of fold it up a bit. But if you put your thumbs in here, that's going to give you a nice amount of the air space for it to rise into. So you do that, and then kind of pull it out as you do it, and then you can just use your hand to roll it up. Okay. So again, we're going to have 1 layer, 2 layers, and 3 layers. And what I like about this method is you don't have to really be particular about where it falls. So when you lay it down, you always want this point to be underneath it so it holds it down, because when it rises, it can tend to come up and then you'll get this poke that's going to burn. So you always want that to be seated underneath it. And with this method, you don't really have to worry about if this is the bottom of this base part where it's sitting. So this is how I'm going to do it, the rest of them. And this is underneath, wherever it lands, that's where you set it on. So if you leave the rounded part of it on the dough, then you're not going to get a rise from the dough on that side as much. It'll rise, but it'll kind of keep this part together, and this part will rise. But if you cut off the rounded edges, then it has the ability for the whole thing to rise and puff up even more. It's not constrained by the dough that's touching. So before I started doing this, I put a pan in the oven, a skillet with water boiling, and that's going to add humidity to the whole oven. And you don't want to have a hot oven, you want to have just some nice moisture in there, and it warmed it up just enough to have the hot skillet in there with the oven closed. So it creates warmth and humidity, but if butter is above 82 degrees, then that's where it melts, is 82. That's where it starts to. So I always try to keep everything around the 75 to 78 range, somewhere in there, because you want the warmth to help it to rise and grow, but you don't want to melt the butter, because then if the butter melts out of the dough, you're going to have a dense croissant, because what gives you the flakiness and the air inside is the fact that the water in the butter is evaporating and it creates steam, which makes it puff up, and so you want to make sure that that butter is maintained inside of the dough. All right, so I'm going to actually show you the skillet. It will have cooled by now. So you can put your hand inside of the oven. The oven is not on. I just put the skillet at the bottom. So this had been boiling when I put it in. I put it at the bottom of the oven, so it has nice humidity inside of there. Okay, so I rolled out the other dough. I did it to a 12-inch by 20-inch. Once it was cut, all the sides were cut off. 12-inch by 20-inch. So I have 5 across of 4-inch wide, and then I have 2 that are 6 inches long. So I'm going to take one of these, just gently stretch it a little bit. The batons that I have, the chocolate, these are 3 inches. So having the 4-inch and then stretching it a little bit, you get to like a 3.5-inch wide, and it's perfect for the baton. So I'm going to put one right at the end here. I'm going to roll it over, and then I'm going to put another one right here. And that's how you're going to get those 2. See if you can see here. So you have the 2 chocolate there. And then again, you want to roll it loosely so it has a chance to rise and has a room. And then I'm just going to put it on my baking sheet. Now these are a little more difficult because you have it rolled and it's easier for it to unroll when it's proving. There's another version you can do, and sometimes this stays a little bit better. That one's easier to just kind of roll and make, but they do tend to unroll. So I'm going to put one here and one at the top, and I'm just going to roll it into the center and roll this into the center. And it does look pretty cute. That you can actually lay it on the baking sheet like that. So I'll probably do some of each, but those are the 2 ways, and I'm sure there are other ways that people do it as well, but those are the 2 that I go in between. This is big piece of marzipan. I'm gonna kind of squish it. It does meld really easily into whatever shape you want. You can smush it. So I'm going to take this, kind of create my own baton with it. And I'll do the same thing and roll it to the middle. Again, nice and loose. And that's it. So these are all of my cut pieces. There are so many different things you can do. One of my favorites is just to stretch it out, wrap it around, and you can kind of put it, just wrap it on my fingers, and then you can kind of put the bottom through so it closes it up sort of. And you can put things inside of that. I'll put some of the lemon curd, you can put jam, all kinds of things. If you want to get super fancy, you can take some of the longer pieces that you have. Make sure it's kind of an even width all the way down. And then you can either twist them, which looks really pretty, and create something, or you can braid them. I'll do one as a twist. And then I'm just going to take it and kind of tuck this loose side underneath. And then you can have kind of a little twist. And it's pretty. You can also, let's see what piece here is going to be good for this. Take this. You can braid them. And it looks nice. But anything you want to do, if you just want to make a ball out of it and poke a hole in the middle and put something into it, then you can do that too. There's no right way to do it. You can just create little braids. You can tuck the ends under and then you can leave it like that, or you can wrap it around itself so you have kind of a braid ball. And just kind of pinch it so it stays closed. You can do a garlic knot technique, which is just taking it and literally making a knot. That's stretched, and you make a simple knot. So you can do whatever, really, anything that you want. But I'm just going to put some of the lemon curd that I have. Take a scoop of this, and I'll put it into here. All right, so here they are. It's been about 2 hours, almost 2.5, and they've been rising in the oven with the steam. Let's see if I can show you. You want to be really delicate with these, but I want to show you what you're looking for here. So I'm just going to wiggle it a little bit. See, it kind of jiggles just a little. And do this one. Okay, so you can see that they are nice and fluffy and they feel like marshmallows. Really, really soft and pillowy. And also you can see what I was talking about with doing this kind of a roll on the filled, because it rose and it kind of pushed over. Meanwhile, these stayed in their shape. Let's see here, there you go. These stayed in their shape and this one kind of started uncurling. So I moved the rack back to the middle of my oven and put my baking stone in it, and I'm preheating to 375. So that's just gonna take a little bit to heat. But I also do want to show, if I can, does this side look the same? Yeah. I'll show you this side though. If you look really carefully on the sides here, then you can, let's see if I can do that. There we go. Then you can see all of the layers that are in there. And so those are the areas we don't want to put our wash, because it'll cover up all of those layers and make it so they can't expand even more when that butter starts to release that water. So the wash is just a tablespoon of heavy cream and an egg yolk. Just save the white for something else, the egg white. So I'm going to scramble that up. Sometimes it's a little bit labor intensive when you're doing a bunch of the rolled croissants because you don't want to get the sides, so it takes a bit longer. The other ones, the filled, are really fast and easy to put the wash on. And you don't want to push down or put pressure on it. You just want to get it on there, and you don't want to get rid of any of that air that has formed inside. You also want to be careful not to get this as much as possible onto the baking sheet, because then you're going to get that burning and you're going to get kind of like a scrambled egg, and you don't want to overdo it on the tops of these, because if it drips down, then you're going to get kind of an attachment from the croissant onto your baking sheet. So I'm just going to very carefully go along the tops. Try not to let it drip down the sides, and just keep going layer by layer. Did get a little drop right there. There we go. So you just go layer by layer and put the wash on. Now, the main purpose of this is to give it that really like bubbly, crispy, golden brown look. Doesn't help with flavor or anything, but it looks beautiful when you have it. So I'm gonna continue doing this. Once this is preheated, I'll put them in and I'll do 20 minutes, and then I'll rotate the pan and I'll do another 10 to 15. And really at that point, what you're looking for is the color, and I'll show you what we're trying to get on that. So I have that first batch in the oven, but I had put in the kind of remnants, Danish style things that I did earlier into the smaller oven, and I wanted to show you what that looks like. So they did start to get pretty brown, so that's why I had the foil on top, because it wasn't quite cooked on the inside. So the brown is perfect, exactly how I would want it, but I did have to stop it from getting any more brown, because in that oven it is really close to the top. So I wanted to show you how pretty. All right, so we've baked all of the batches. They're cooling behind us here. We leave them on the baking sheet to cool completely, and then we can take them off and put in on the cooling rack if you want to, but by that point they're already cool. So then you just put them in whatever you want to store them in. But I wanted to show you the different types here. First, I wanted to show you the braid. So this didn't have the wash on it, and I mean, it's very pretty. It has a nice coloring to it. But if you compare it to the croissant, you can see that just has a really nice shine to it, and as a darker, deeper brown. So I'm going to start by cutting the croissant. You excited?
Yes. Yes, I'm excited too. Ooh, that's a nice one.
Okay. I'm going to show you inside. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm really excited for these. So you can see the circular pattern, and that is from rolling it. And you can see just how light it is in here. See all of those layers, and that's exactly what we want. All right, so this is the regular croissant. And you can see how flaky and crispy that is. Okay.
Can we try it?
We're gonna try in just a minute, sweetheart, okay? I want to show all of these first.
Okay.
So this was the, thank you. This was the rolled marzipan, not doing the one on each edge and rolling it into the middle. This is the just rolling it and putting it as you continue rolling. So you can see it did kind of come apart a little bit unrolled as it rose. But that's that one. All right, and last one is the good.
Pain au chocolat.
Good, pain au chocolat. So this is the chocolate croissant. And this one is the one that we put the chocolate on each end and roll it into the middle. So you can see it still rose really nicely here, but you have the two pieces of chocolate. And it may not look like it's a lot of chocolate, but it's really the perfect ratio when you start eating it.
Whoa.
Okay.
That one's my favorite.
Pain au chocolat? Yeah.
Mommy,
Yes, hon.
I see the chocolate.
You see the chocolate?
Yeah.
Does it look yummy?
I know it's Is that it?
Okay, so we're going to start with this one, the plain one.
Okay.
Okay. All right, which piece do you want? You want that one? Cora, which piece do you want?
I'm gonna take you.
Okay, cheers.
3, 2, 1.
Mm-hmm. Nice and light.
Yeah.
Nice and flaky. That's great.
Yummy.
Mm-hmm, yummy.
Yummy.
All right. We'll do the marzipan. I'm just going to take a little piece of the marzipan because when you do it this way, it all ends up right in the middle. All right, Corey, you want this one? Here you go, Colin. Cheers. You sure you chew first, okay? You don't have to take the bite yet.
Okay. Is it the chocolate?
It's nice. That's the almond. Marzipan.
Oh.
And finally, the chocolate.
No. And we have to try the cherry.
The braid? We can try that one. We can try that one later. All right, so pain au chocolat.
My chocolate. That's mine.
Yeah. So this was a great batch. Like I keep saying, it is a lot of work, a lot of technique, but it's worth it. If you take the time, you think so too? Thank you for joining us this week, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one.